And we're back for another Deadlock Fight Night. I'm Jason Kaplan, joined by ZP here to break down some of the action that's going to be happening today. And of course, we do have a third head to our Hydra that'll be joining us when we do start to break down this first match. But ZP, welcome back yet again, man. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Pretty common day. Just usual tournament stuff. Definitely not worrying about NA rosters right before the beginning of the day. No, none of that. No. It's all completely normal. But honestly, Jason, I'm just glad to settle down and get into what has been the best Deadlock in the last few weeks. The EU region has been giving us fantastic Deadlock week after week, and there's no reason to believe that today will be any different.
Oh, 100%. Let's take a quick look at the schedule for you guys to get you updated and adequate of what's going to be happening today. So if you're unfamiliar with what the Deadlock Fight Night is about, it is a little bit of a show match here where we have two teams that we choose. We select very carefully from other events that are happening here in Deadlock. We take the best of the best and pit them up against each other to determine who goes on to play against our king. And right now, DMS have been the king the last 2 weeks running, earned themselves a nice $2,000. While we look at the NA side of this broadcast, we do have Llama Lords up against Yuki Panuki, which I'm going to have a great time saying. And of course, the winner of those plays up against Hydra Nation, who have been back-to-back champions 5 weeks in a row, ZP. It is becoming very difficult to find a team that can beat these guys.
I mean, Hydra Nation, look, they have been the top of the top in NA, and look, teams just find their power being drawn to Hydra Nation as time goes on. So, look, they have a lot of things going for them. We'll see if they maintain their streak of excellence here today, but man, you talk about EU. This is a region right now, Jason, where anything can happen. And also, we got big shakeups to the meta to look forward to and talk about as we get deeper into the broadcast. So the average EU draft that we've been used to might be very, very different today.
It just seems like every 2 weeks we have things changing drastically. And of course, if you're a fan of the show, we do it for the players. We do it for you guys at home who are watching. One way to support us is actually to head over to deadlockfightnight.com and check out some of our merch we have here. We've got shirts, we got sweaters, and if I'm not mistaken, I did see a little bit of a cheeky mouse pad in there as well.
The Gooped merchandise just continues to grow. And hey, I mean, multiple ways to get some merch, support the product. And look, this is the type of stuff where you'll look at back 5 years from now and be like, yo, I got this original piece of merchandise. When did you get into Deadlock competition in esports? You have the proof. You can get it right here, right now.
My proof is going to be whenever we get a Deadlock Fight Night shot glass for every time you say Pojilaya Skumbriya completely differently. But not to mention, all of the proceeds, of course, go right back into this event. We don't see a penny of it. Go straight to the players, go straight to the running cost of this entire show. So make sure you guys check that out. Not to mention, if you weren't here last week, we do have a sub button as well. And we'd love to see you guys sub into the channel to support as well. And again, all that money does, of course, go back into this product. And even if you don't want to sub, just being here to watch is all we're really going to be caring about. But speaking of caring, one man who cares maybe sometimes too much is our third person here on the show. We got DDK joining us live on the show. Dan the man with the plan, with this fantastic coif of hair. I might steal that one day. Just rip it off your hair and put it on mine. How you doing, Dan?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm trying to get the Shiv thing, trying to become Shiv, but to be honest, Shiv kind of sucks now. So I don't know if I need to find someone else to emulate with the hair. Who else has good hair?
Yamato has good hair.
Yamato's pretty broken, but we might not see Yamato, so I don't know if that works either.
Yeah, that is very true. And one thing we're going to do for you every 2 weeks when we do have these major changes, of course, get you guys up to date on what has went down in our latest patch change. And speaking of Yamato, we'll start off actually talking about the economy game here of how things have shifted up in Deadlock within the last patch. Now, ZP, we've got to see these. We got to see some slight changes into it. But more importantly, it's about the soul sharing when it comes to lanes past the 8-minute mark.
Previously, the last Deadlock Fight Night, soul sharing, once you hit 8 minutes, it stopped being fully split the way it was in the pre-8-minute phase. Now, you get way more economy by staying as two players in lane. That did get nerfed a little bit in a mini patch where it's not quite as powerful as it was in Rendition 1, but even in the new form, you still get way, way more economy by being in the lane with at least one other person into the mid-game. Also, hero kill gold is up, where right now your souls, you get way more for actually getting kills on the people. So the idea of actually getting a comeback where if you catch 1-2 heroes out, you suddenly get a much bigger infusion of souls. And also the bigger thing that's kind of coming in from this too is that the gap between the heroes that are running the jungle and the heroes that are more in lane and roaming is less than it was pre-patch. So you have less of a chance of getting the raid boss in Furnace that simply is 15k souls ahead of everyone else and cannot actually feasibly die.
Yeah, Dan, what's your thoughts about these changes?
Yeah, I think it's significant because one of the things like ZP mentioned, you had the system in before where the soul sharing was more generous on lane, but the problem was back then is that it kind of devalued solo pushing. But now they've kind of adjusted it a little bit. So it's still like the value if you're playing by yourself because you're going to get 100%. And so split pushing and stuff isn't going to feel like you're losing value. So I think that's a pretty nice adjustment that they've made there. Plus, the game should become faster and should have a higher tempo to it. And it should also allow heroes that maybe have had that support issue where they're not going to be farming as much to be able to stay on lane, be a part of the fights, and actually get to their items more quickly. So we might see heroes like Dynamo reappear a little bit because Dynamo needed some more investment, but at the same time had that problem where other people will be in the jungle, so that's not my job. I'm kind of on lane, but I'm also more supportive, so I'm not getting the farm. So I actually think there's a lot of other stuff we'll go into with what this economy change reflects in terms of the gameplay, but already I think there's a lot of positive changes for how the gameplay will go as a result of this.
Well, not to mention 2 weeks ago, we did have that massive change to Greytown, which finally brought him into our picking pool when he was unpicked, unbanned the entire time before. But we do have major changes to Yamato. And DDK, why don't you kind of go into this really quickly about what we potentially could or could not see out of her?
Well, I think with Yamato, obviously the ult is really just the problem. Is Yamato is just like unkillable, and the damage burst is pretty ridiculous. And so that's going to be, I think, really the big issue here, because Yamato can come online very quickly as well and is unkillable. So I don't know really what more is to say than that, to be honest. I mean, ZP, we already saw like a lot of usage from Yamato, and she's just gotten a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit maybe underselling it. Now, it's kind of funny that, you can't die, or rather, you can die in Shadow Transformation now, technically. But when you get the rest of the entire buffs that Yamato is getting Shadow Transformation, the reality is that she won't be dying in Shadow Transformation in the vast majority of cases. Also, when you consider just how the teams are going to be picking and banning, there's a world where you don't really see Yamato at all today. It might just be the hero that is perma-banned by the team that does not have first pick, right? So yeah, we'll see where it goes, but Yamato's priority has never been higher in the history of competitive Deadlock than it is right now.
Oh, 100%. And obviously, when it comes to EU, there's a lot of like individual focus bans, like Paradox, for instance, if you're thinking of Mikhail S. So I'm really curious to see how this is going to play out here in Europe, where I feel like there's a whole meta game when it comes to the draft phase for us. But of course, there was one more change. We didn't really see it too much when it came to the Deadlock Fight Night, though I'm assuming you guys at home did see it quite a bit in your games. Soul Rebirth has now been taken out of the game. DDK, what's your initial thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think this is great because I think it's also somewhat in line with some of the other changes with regards to the economy. But again, we'll link back to that point later. But not having Soul Rebirth in the game is nice because when you get to the 30-minute plus mark in Deadlock, it kind of becomes a battle of who has more Soul Rebirths, and that team's going to win because the time it takes for you to come back after you die is so long that and with extremely high level organized play, Soul Rebirth becomes like a must pick up item, and then it's just who has more wins. And so I like that they're removing that dynamic because it creates more of a reward to the team fighting, which is kind of as it should be. And again, that's actually reflected in the economy changes right now, that if again, I'm trying to like stay on point, but everything's kind of interconnected. But with the economy changes and how they've changed hero kills and the value from staying on lane with souls, it creates this world where if you're in a comeback scenario and you actually wipe the other team, you're actually going to come back way faster now. So you've got to be much more careful with team fights anyway. So I kind of like that the removal of Soul Rebirth kind of plays into that because you're unable to mitigate that. If you take a bad team fight, if you're ahead, you get punished.
What about you, ZP?
Yeah, I think Dan hits the key point here too with Soul Rebirth changing, right? The idea that everyone has more money right now because of the economy changes. And that means that if Soul Rebirth was still in the game, the odds of us getting into like the 25-minute to 30-minute mark and suddenly going, everyone has a Soul Rebirth was way, way higher. So I think the devs at Valve, they saw this coming and they go, no. We're going to get in front of this. This item is already a little bit problematic anyways. We're not going to let everyone pick it up now that you suddenly have this influx of income.
Okay, well, you know what? Why don't we start to laser focus on what's coming up today here as we dive into our first match of the day. Pojilaya Skumbriya. Don't worry, we'll hear ZP say it a million different ways, and I totally understand ZP. It gets me as well. Up against Metal Skill as we'll take a look here at our rosters between these two teams. Now, PS, obviously a long-time veteran when it comes to Deadlock Fight Night, whereas Metal Skill, we haven't seen them too much.
Yeah, Metal Skill, I mean, we've seen them in the past, but they've been kind of in and out. Though what's notable for Metal Skill is that they had a really good performance in the Sinner Sacrifice tournament that took place over the last weekend. So that's why we say, hey, we're going to give you guys another shot. And the one nice thing here I like, Jason, when I look at both of these teams, roster stability. Pojilaya Skumbriya, they've been running with the same roster over and over again in these tournaments. Metal Skill, this has been the same core that we've seen for quite a while at the same time. I mean, I love the stability. I really do love it, especially when compared to what's going on the other side of the Atlantic, roster-wise.
Oh man, Dan, yeah, as we take a look at these rosters, is any players in particular that you're really wanting us to focus on to kind of nitpick their gameplay or look to see them to be the ones to carry the match for us?
It's a good question. I'm curious, obviously, based off of like how things are going to be affected by some of the changes in like what, people's internal like tier lists. I mean, firstly, Europe and NA seems to never be on the same page so far with tier lists, so there is that, I suppose. But I think all of these players are pretty awesome, like Sunset, Hardeki, Zanya. Zanya, I really like watching just for the initiation in particular, but we've also seen a lot less play from the Zanya like Lash, for example. So to be honest, your guess is as good as mine at this point in terms of what we should expect or see.
I'm really curious, ZP, if we'll have together potentially get the Yamato. For me, one of the best Yamato players when it comes to EU, but anyone in particular you're looking towards?
I mean, for me, if I'm looking at Pojilaya Skumbriya, I'm always going to be looking at Hardeki, right? Where Hardeki has still been one of the most consistent carry players around. Also, pretty good versatility. I think one thing that was brought up to me that was pretty interesting, former Overwatch coach, Dream, I talk to him every now and then about meta stuff, and he brought up the point going, hey, are you going to be seeing as much Seven right now, where the value of the jungle is relatively less than what it used to be, and Seven's entire bread and butter was kind of how far ahead can you get from eating the entire jungle, right? Like, I do wonder if teams have looked at Seven and wondered, okay, maybe the overall value of Seven might be a little bit less than it was pre-patch, and I mean Hardeki, who a lot of the times has sort of been thrown on the Seven in the draft, would be playing something else, whether it be, something like a Haze, or, probably not a Shiv, which used to be his bread and butter, because, as Dan mentioned earlier, Shiv kind of sucks now, so probably not going to be seeing that.
Okay, well, gentlemen, here at the Deadlock Fight Night, what we love to do is innovate. We love to push the boundaries of what we can do here on the show and always make it better for you viewers at home. Now, ZP, you have organized a different way of doing the draft in terms of who gets to choose between first pick or first ban. What have you come up with for us?
Yeah, so we used to do a coin flip, which was me going to Google, typing in coin flip, and telling which team they won, but that wasn't exciting for us here. What we really needed was to go, you know what? Mo and Krill 1v1. 2 Mo and Krills enter, 1 Mo and Krill leaves, nothing but melee and parry. That's all you get. And we throw it into the boxing ring, essentially. That is the middle of the map, in the pit. There's no more honorable combat in all of Deadlock. And that's how we decide in our best of one who gets choice of first pick and first ban.
Yeah, no boxing gloves here, DDK, which means it's all coming down to the fisticuffs. So let's actually take a look here at our first 1v1 Mo and Krill to determine how the coin flip worked out. Of course, we do have metal skills on the left-hand side here. And of course, well, in the yellow or the orange, Pojilaya Skumbriya.
And then they get down and dirty into it quick. It's fast, and Lex just gets right on in. And just drops that on top. You see Krill just rolling over to the side too.
That's so weird. I thought the balls went in the sky, but his balls went on Pojilaya Skumbriya's body. That's weird.
Yeah. Sometimes you reverse things here, Jason. You defy the natural order. But what that means is that Metal Skill got to decide whether to be first or second in this order. And I believe in this pick, I think they chose second. I might be wrong, but I think that's what we're looking at here. And I think it's going to be Pojilaya Skumbriya with first pick, first ban. And I think what that means here is that they won't be banning Yamato, because if the other team doesn't ban Yamato, you get to pick it.
Exactly. You force the other to actually have to ban it away if they want to. Now, Dan, as I do see here, the first ban coming through out of Mirage. If you're Metal Skill, knowing you have 2 picks first, which we did see quite heavy last week go into like our race as a guaranteed pickup in Grave Talon, what do you expect Metal Skill to potentially do?
Well, I mean, Mirage is definitely considered S tier, I think, by most people in NA as well, considered definitely an S tier pick. But I think like ZP was alluding to earlier, the expected ones are probably the Yamato Paradox to get rid of. I think another like S tier pick is going to be the Viscous. So last time we were kind of shocked by like where some of these like really highly rated or high, the heroes in the upper echelons where they were actually picked, like 5th and 6th slot and so on. So I'd hope, especially with the buff that we saw for Viscus recently, that Viscus is going to get in there pretty quickly. As you know, now you can like expand the size of the goo ball, and so it's going to connect a lot more and be a lot more disruptive in these fights. And I think it's also affected. Oh. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to jump in there, Dan, but Wraith is a first pick, which again, with Together, we know how good he is on Yamato. I was surprised to see this actually.
Well, I can just add in, like, if with these changes, Wraith should actually go up in value, because you're looking at some of the other carries, like, you know, your Infernus or your Sevens and so on. These guys are going down in value because they can't farm the jungle as much, which is like part of the guarantee of those heroes. And I feel like Wraith is the best hyper carry that's on lane. So I don't know that there's anyone in the same class. So that makes a lot of sense. And then there's the Viscus too. So we're happy to see that, I think.
Take a look at this, and look, Wraith is highly
ZP.
Wraith is highly valued in EU, but given what Yamato has been doing, you know what? Look, on one hand, it's hard to sort of bring down the value of Wraith. It's still an incredibly good hero, and EU players have been using Wraith to the max. But also, you just gave up Viscus and Yamato, where Viscus also right now kind of works as a little bit of a soft counter to the Wraith, where a lot of your telekinesis plays now have to have another check going, well, can I use telekinesis? Is there a Viscus nearby that can drop a cube? So going the first pick Wraith and allowing Viscus Yamato, I have to say I'm not 100% in favor of it, but we'll see how it pans out.
I mean, keep in mind, last week, guys, we did see Play With Me on Wraith. And Buff Enjoyers, when they played against DMS, their response to that was 3 ethereal shifts. And then it took DMS a long time to get Curse eventually farmed up on Play With Me on the Wraith to be able to counter that for the split pushing yet again. So with the Viscus, it kind of almost bypasses that need of ethereal shift unless you're trying to split push.
One thing that jumps into my head straight away as well, you know, you're up against the Wraith, and like another item that receives a slight buff was Reactive Barrier, because you get an extra stamina when you proc it now, so which is obviously additionally nice to ensure that you can actually escape. So I've also got the Binding Word from Warden there, so definitely some Reactive Barrier purchases I feel like could be pretty good. And speaking of which as well, like looking at the Ivy pickup for Metal Skill, you know, Ivy's a hero that's actually a pretty good initiator in the sense that, you know, you get the silence off of the bomb from the ult, and the Kudzu bombs are still really good despite receiving some of those nerfs. But that also pressures Pojilaya Skumbriya. See, I'm still hesitating when I try to say their name. It kind of pressures them to like make sure that somebody buys the knockdown as well, because that's kind of the direct counter for the Ivy ult.
I got you, Dan. Listen to this.
Pojilaya Skumbriya.
There you go.
There we go.
That's
nice.
how my fiance
I need to get that on my soundboard.
She's Eastern European, so I kind of believe exactly what you say when it comes to that. But when you see Vindicta ZP, which you've only seen twice, and we've only seen it out of Hydra Nation the first time in EU, what's your thoughts?
I think Vindicta got a whole lot of buffs in multiple patches in a row, and this is simply teams warming up to the idea of playing around Vindicta again. I think you think about the skill cap on Vindicta, you think about the various builds that people are running, particularly with higher spirit. I mean, look, Vindicta is a character that can take over the game, and I think people have realized, look, she's like pretty decently effective right now, especially when you're considering other options that you'd be picking there. You know, maybe you go with the Haze. I mean, people are kind of up and down on Haze. Some teams really like running it, other teams are just in the mode of no, and Vindicta just gives you a different option. Also, Vindicta is still a character that also forces the other team to spend part of their economy on things like knockdown, where maybe they otherwise wouldn't, right? So she has other effects on the game that I think are pretty beneficial as a whole.
One thing I do worry about is we do have a Viscus, Yamato, and an Abrams, and now a Lash, who can easily get in the face of Vindicta quite easily. However, we do know Vindicta has very high snowball potential here. DDK, what are you looking at now here for both teams? We do see the Lash and Pocket locked in.
Okay, so we are definitely looking, I think, for like a support there for Pojilaya Skumbriya. I would love to see, honestly, someone pick a Dynamo. I think that would actually be pretty nice. And just as a quick like side note in terms of support, I think Health Nova also got like changed a little bit, and it's actually become, I think, more appealing to be bought just across the team. So you could even see it be viable for multiple heroes to buy, because you're getting actually damage bonuses and other just like generally useful stats. So you might see more instances of Health Nova. So I don't know if that will change the support situation, but we get Kelvin. I think that's a great, you know, classic support pick as well, because, you know, was it going to be Dynamo, Kelvin, McGinnis is kind of maybe some of the options we'd be looking at, and that's what we're thinking now, I would assume, for Metal Skill for the 6th slot there. But they're actually going to go 7. I guess they already have the Ivy, so that makes sense. That makes sense.
I mean, I don't hate a ZP if you want to big brain it by putting the stun on like a Yamato who's diving Vindicta, and then the stun can go off, knock her out of the sky, and make it a lot easier for you to take her down, ideally.
Always deal with it. I mean, heck, people have even been going at times Phantom Strike on Lash to simply instantly teleport on Vindicta and bring her down. Like, they'll have options galore to sort of deal with the Vindicta. But when I look at the overall story of this game and where it's at, I don't think either team is necessarily weak in the early game, but there's definitely scenarios where Pojilaya Skumbriya is going to have a terrifying early to mid game here, where you think about what happens when you hit 3K. Well, Wraith can roam and get very quick telekinesis pickoffs at 3K. Vindicta is scary on 3K roams early in the game with how you can use Assassinate. Warden, again, one of the biggest mid-game power spike heroes in the game, and the way that people tend to play Pocket is one where it's very roaming, very aggressive. So even though Metal Skill has characters that are, pretty decent early, like Viscus, Abrams, Ivy, and, the new Yamato where they get ult and it's difficult to fight, I still think the narrative of this game in the early to mid game is going to be Metal Skin simply surviving what is going to be a very strong power spike out of Pojilaya Skumbriya, which could very well snowball out of control.
All right, Dan, any last thoughts here before we do head into the first match?
Yeah, I think, one of the things, I was watching one of Adethi's videos recently, and he made a great point about the fact that this patch creates a pretty heavy tempo change, and that you want to really prioritize trying to get builds that come online more quickly, and because of that reason, because we want to, everyone gets more souls more quickly, you get more benefit from staying on lane. So I'm going to be curious to look at the itemization for these teams to see who's going to respect that more.
Okay, well, DDK, thank you so much for joining us here in that first match. We'll see you right after the match as we break everything down on what went down here. As ZP, we're going to dive into our first match here of Deadlock Fight Night number 6, the EU side of the portion, or the broadcast, with Metal Skill up against Pojilaya Skumbriya.
And this is going to be good, especially to see how things have changed post-economy changes. And also, the funny thing about favoring characters that come online a little bit earlier, no Infernus here, Jason. Not in the bans, not in the picks, and that is something that you don't see a whole lot nowadays. But maybe now is the new era. As you take a look at the lane breakdown here, between it, you got Pocket versus Yamato in lane 1, Wraith versus Abrams in lane 4, but it's lane 2 and 3 here, Jason, where I think a lot of the difference is going to be made early on.
Yeah, definitely looking at the Vindicta, played by Tass here. Definitely has a weakish early laning phase, but with the Kelvin support going to be helping mitigate that quite a bit. I think it's really coming down to how well Tass can start to snowball here. And also, one thing I'm kind of curious about is, like, every time I ever talk about Play With Me and how he, like, leeches souls in 2 lanes, I always see people in chat like, people have been doing this for months. But we never see it that often in competitive play. So I'm curious, will we potentially see a little bit of that today with obviously Tass potentially roaming between like lane 4 and lane 3?
Teams are going to be very much on top of it, more so than they have in the past. Also, that was great pressure onto the Viscus, just good harass from the Vindicta. I think here, Jason, when I look at the lanes, the most potential for things to really get out of hand one way or the other is probably going to be in lane 2, right? Where you have the Lash and 7, lots of potential to land a stun into a slam. Meanwhile, Geist and Warden, plenty of opportunity both for harass from the Geist and, of course, if you're not careful, you get hit with Binding Words. So this is a lane that I think truly could go either way. And the downside here, of course, is that if you're Pojilaya Skumbriya and you lose the lane, then you end up giving Lex the start a Lash would want to simply go roam and, do the Lash standard of taking over the game via just early pressure with Death Slam.
Yeah, doing what Lash does well. I've definitely seen that in the past year quite a few times. I'm also keeping my eye on Heli on the Yamato here, up against Together on the Pocket. Now, again, I said before, Together is a phenomenal Yamato player. So on the Pocket, I think he's going to know exactly how to deal with Heli and how Yamato has been changed. I keep saying Yamato and Yamato, it's killing me. It's just like Pojilaya Skumbriya, I swear. But I'm really curious to see how that lane is going to play out in particular, because I feel like both those two heroes in particular could have a lot of presence in the mid game.
And, I'm looking at the lane breakdown right now, Jason, looking at health, and it's definitely a little bit spicy in the Lash versus Geist matchup. They were both Lash and Geist getting down the half, and once you start seeing characters get down the half HP like that, this is where a single play where someone is just a little bit out of position can result in either side getting a big advantage within the lane. See Warden applying pressure from the left, and counter pressure going the other way, stun coming in, and that's going to be bringing Warden a little bit low, but both sides, Jason, just looking for that key advantage.
Yeah, I do like the way Zanya was playing off to the side, just trying to eliminate some angles they could potentially play from, but more importantly, trying to get the harass in. And speaking of harass, he's coming behind the Yamato, as Helly's going to be extremely low in HP and be finished off here. Sunset, in the meantime, picks up the kill on the Abrams, played by Maxish. So already, Pojilaya Skumbriya off to a strong start.
Well, that wasn't just a strong start. That was a double rotation where they took one player out of 2, one player out of 3, and brought it to the side lanes essentially at the same time, and both got picks. That was a really nice rotation of Pojilaya Skumbriya, and of course, it inherently helps both of their solo lanes.
Yeah, and again, I've said so many times in the past for PS, actually, I'm going to have to hold on to that in a second as we do see together going to be pushed in from lane 2 here, trying to go for the gank to at least get one kill back going for themselves. And it looks like together might be able to escape this one, but with 3 players, it's going to be very difficult to do so, as Spacemaker has gone down in lane 3 and together has gone down in lane 1. So some ganks working out pretty well here, but what I was trying to say is that PS, I said in the past so many times, they're like one of the most aggressive early game teams. They look for those kills very early on with rotations. And just like clockwork, it works out for them.
Yeah, and also, Jason, you talk about the foundational things here in Deadlock. The race to 3K. Pojilaya Skumbriya, their ultimate's coming online here now. Metal Skill, they got Death Slam, but the rest still yet to come online. They just get Viscus's ult, but this is where you can look to see Pojilaya Skumbriya do even more rotations. As I say that, take a look at Kelvin. Kelvin rotating over, and this is where, if you're Abrams, you might want to get out of dodge.
There we go. Telekinesis comes through. The liftoff as well. Max just going to be bursted down before he even has a chance. And that was Lich just coming back to lane 4, basically, where he previously already ganked lane 4. They got the kill, and then comes back yet again for another. And Pojilaya Skumbriya, you have to be very careful about their snowball, as they're currently ahead 4,000 souls, only 5 minutes in, ZP.
And they're going to try and make the most of it here. Meanwhile, Lex gets hit with the soul exchange, tries to go away, 49 HP. Goes behind the pillar, does the healing right, and says, okay, am I safe? The answer, probably yes for now, but nice Geist ult to, again, keep the pressure up in lane 2.
Yeah, the key for now, as we do see the first guard in the game go down as well. That's going to be going over to PS's side. And honestly, I gotta give credit here to the way Zanya's playing this. He's getting so much harassed down. And speaking of harass, Swan Dive might get caught here as the goo ball comes out, looking for the potential escape down, very low on HP. He does have his Ivy there off to his side, but I don't think he's going to be able to really do much, as Swan Dive escapes with a little bit of HP left, but they do lose 2 teammates in the skirmish.
Yeah, unfortunately for Metal Skill, not everyone having Goo Ball to get away. Pojilaya Skumbriya still able to pick up 2. And Jason, we're only about 6 minutes into the game right now, and it's already feeling like PS is running away with it and then some. This is starting to become a very problematic soul lead.
Oh, another gank comes in, another telekinesis. And most likely another kill. Actually, he does get around the corner. Maxish might be able to survive to fight another day, but this constant pressure in lane 4 is just really preventing him from doing too much. He's only on 3.7k souls, whereas counterpart's at 4.7. And now one thing I'm looking towards, though, ZP, is that first urn. You pointed out very nicely last week when we came to the, I believe it was the NA games, of just holding the urn because you realize we can't push into the enemy lines to turn it in, considering the soul lead we might have. So they just hold it for later to make sure it's not too effective later on.
Even with all the rotation from Metal Skill into lane, they lose Lex on the rotation. Task comes in, drops the Assassinate on the Maxich, and Pojilaya Skumbriya, even Metal Skill comes in with an over-rotation, Jason. They bring it over just enough to counter, come out ahead on kills, and you look at the rest of the map, they're getting even more done in terms of push, getting another Guardian down at the same time.
The unfortunate part is we're seeing, you know, PS rotate so many players in so many of these different lanes, but Metal Skill have to kind of respond in kind, which means they can't push lanes down. They can't push for Guardians to look for that potential first flex slot here, which right now Pojilaya Skumbriya are just one more Guardian away from, and it might be coming down to lane 1 here.
You see the pressure coming in on both lane 1 and lane 4. Pojilaya Skumbriya looking for the other Guardian. They're going to get it. Death Slam coming in from Lex. Drops the Warden. Looking for the finish on top of it. Binding Word comes in. Able to dodge away. Now, with the Yamato. More pressure onto the Warden. Zanya, very, very low right now. Is Zanya going to be able to get away? The answer looks like yes. Gets covered by the pocket. So even then, Jason, you're putting in the Lash ult, and you're not getting a kill from it.
Well, not to mention the Death Slam, but the damage that Lex did just felt like nothing against Zanya. Yeah. I mean, his health barely moved, right? It was up to his teammate to come in, Heli, to actually get some damage done. And there's like a slight 2k difference between those two players, but we're already up to 11k difference now, 7 minutes, almost 8 minutes in. I would imagine PS not going to really look for this first urn or potentially, I want to say we're not going to see them go for the first urn because the gap's going to be too wild. They're going to have to push into enemy territory to turn that in. And that's honestly not really worth a fight right now. But speaking of fights, lane 1's gonna be popping off here.
Ellie
And it's
running
over.
a foul. Yeah, Ellie running a foul of Zanya and going down. No last stand was even required. Arctic Beam freezing out Swan Dive, and the kills just continue to pile up in favor of Pojilaya Skumbriya. And yeah, I mean, the upside here from Metal Skill is that you've gotten so thoroughly worked in the early game that the Urn is going to be in your territory. And maybe Pojilaya Skumbriya won't want to go for it, but even if they don't go for it, Jason, they're going to make them pay a penalty and push onto walkers, which are already getting pressured.
That slowing Hex just making it so Heli cannot escape. He's forced to go for the fight. The last stand comes in. They're going for the dive on top of this Walker. He's down about 300 HP, but again, the heal coming in after the Shadow Transformation's done. He gets the parry onto Zanya as well, but will he have the damage to actually support this? There's no one actually diving in to help deal with this. Zanya still pulls off the 1v1 and potentially going to pull off the escape as well, as this Walker's looking worse for wear.
Jason, 2 words for you. Stat check. 9k Warden versus 5k Yamato. I don't care how strong Yamato is right now. That's not going well for anyone. That said, Zanya, low HP, getting chased down, is going to fall to Maxich. Well, Swan Dive here on the goo ball. Pojilaya Skumbriya still able to pick up 1 towards the end, and 40k to 56k. You have to ask yourself, Jason, when you look at the 2 teams here, who on Metal Skill can get a kill 1v1? And the answer is, at this point, no one. That's how significant the gap is on a hero-to-hero basis.
Yeah, only one I can maybe think of is Maxish. Yeah, exactly. Maybe him, and maybe onto like Litz or something, like more of a squishier target to deal with. Then again, Litz is going to heal. And speaking of what DDK said before, Health Nova going to be used as well. So we are going to see it picked up for Litz. We've already seen it used to help save Task earlier on. And right now, Pojilaya Skumbriya are just in the driver's seat. They get to really decide where they want to fight, what they want to take. And Metal Skill, unfortunately, have yet to get one single Guardian in this game.
Well, we do have buffs coming up soon. Buffs and the first Urn of the game. You see both teams going around the Metal Skill saying, we really, really want this buff on the left. We're going to fight for it. But Pojilaya Skumbriya saying, you know what? We're going to fight for it too. Shelter dropped pretty early into the fight. Death Slam in from Lex. Looking for anything. Geist under pressure, but 1300 HP. Not feeling very pressured. Just getting tickled by the poke here, Jason. It's nowhere near enough to even make Hardeki feel threatened.
Yeah, these death slams are kind of being counterproductive here. Just throwing in people who can take down your entire team. They do respawn taking on Zanya, but again, we can see PS immediately respawn back yet again. And in the meantime, PS are still pushing lane forward, looking for another walker in this game, getting their next flex slot unlocked as we finally see Heli trying to go in, Shadow Transformation used, but is he realistically able to pick up any of these kills?
Kelvin gets Kelvin with the aid of Maxich. Goes in, grapple. Now the hunt on the Geist. Geist does not have Shadow Transformation here, has a parry, but that's not going to be nearly enough. And one thing that's really worth noting here that's been a EU special is the rise of Restorative Locket, Jason. And I really liked what we saw from Heli there, where Heli pops a fully charged Locket right before popping the Shadow Transformation and taking advantage of all the resist you get. Really good item to ultimate synergy there.
Yeah, I mean, Heli, even though he was punished quite heavily in lane, starting to come back a little bit. 9k souls, not quite the 11 that Maxich has, but again, we know the power that Yamato can be when we get to the later stages of this game. But Maxich has to be careful here in lane 1. He's going to be ganked by 3 players on Pojilaya Skumbriya. He will fall as he's looking for a Guardian, but still, 11.5 minutes in, not a single one picked up, and we do see the Urn going to be grabbed here by Metal Skill, smartly enough. It's not going to be that many souls, only about 4k here, ZP, but still, 4k is a lot to claw back this lead that currently they're against.
I mean, you do have some comeback mechanics that go into it too, and you look at Pojilaya Skumbriya, they're not particularly keen to go into this. You look at the map positioning, they're more keen to pressure the walker down in lane 3. That's their pound of flesh they want to get from this. They say, Urn, you guys can have it, but the lead does narrow down to 10k as a result.
10k, but still, Flex Thought's going to be masked when it comes into this. A couple of missed assassinates here, not really amounting to too much damage out of Tass, unfortunately, as he's going to be closed in on by Heli. Going to be a 1v1 between those two. So it looks like Tass will be able to escape, and Heli's not able to continue the chase here. But PS, like you said, I mean, it's down to 12k now. You still have to be relatively careful here. The comeback mechanics are going to start to hit hard. And speaking of hitting hard, Tass gets his revenge, getting the kill onto Heli.
And the other problem here, you take a look at the push situation where they're about to get the final walker. They are going to be awash in flex slots as a result. So for Pojilaya Skumbriya, not only are you richer, you have the space to actually make use of the riches. You throw some cards in onto the 7, but now you get to back up with essentially full map control right now and full ability to dictate the tempo of the game.
I mean, mid boss. Yeah, I was expecting it. If you want to force a fight in a position that you can win, mid boss might be exactly it. Sunset still waiting for his telekinesis to come up. We're taking a look at Metal Skill to contest this, and it looks like we will see it. Now, keep in mind, Yamato still has the ability to steal really easily if he's able to get into position. And there we go. The Rejuvenator is about to drop here. Here comes the engagement.
They're going in. They're looking for the steal. Metal Skill, they get the steal, Jason. They're able to hop on in. It's the Ivy Yamato special, and Yamato didn't even have to blow Shadow Transformation. And just like that, Metal Skill back in the game. Even if Pojilaya Skumbriya cleans them up here, this was a good exchange for Metal Skill.
Oh, they're still going on the chase here. Only 3 people left alive for Metal Skills. We're about to lose one more. YG just trying to escape, and really no chance you're going to do so up against Sunset. So they'll pick themselves up 5 eliminations, 5 big kills coming through. Helly, it might even be the 6th, as he's actually very low in HP. And I can see his health being popped to Shadow Transformation as well. And, well, he's just trying to survive. But the steal does come through. And Metal Skill, they live to fight another day, more importantly. And I feel like we saw Buff and Joyers do this quite a bit last week up against DMS, where they stole, I think it was 2 mid bosses in a row. But unfortunately, it wasn't enough for them, at least in that case, to come back.
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of setting it up going in. It's risky to go for the raw mid-boss when you have to deal with things like Stone Form, when you have to deal with Yamato ult if it was up. It wasn't up in that instance, but even when you add in things like the Abrams charge, it's not a guaranteed mid-boss. But on the same note, Pojilaya Skumbriya, they still get a whole bunch of eliminations there. They don't fall behind in actual soul, so it's not the worst overall. And here we go, some pressure. Pocket in onto the Viscous. Swan Dive getting very low. Doesn't have to blow the goo ball here just yet, Jason. Gets to keep it in reserve.
You know what scares me, though, ZP, looking at this match at the moment? It's TAS. 19,000 souls. He's currently leading his team, and only really Maxish comes close on the opposing side for Metal Skills. So TAS can just have a field day here, knowing that the front line, if you talked about the stat check before out of Pojilaya Skumbriya, it's going to be hard to deal with their front line, let alone get into the back line against TAS, who can already 1v1. I feel like most people at the moment.
Jason, I think that was Pojilaya Skumbriya picking up both mid buffs, just keeping Metal Skill back. So a quick little grab and dash, as now the next urn is in play. And this urn, very, very important. I mean, this is an urn that if Metal Skill gets it, it's going to completely even up the soul deficit. But you take a look at who's over it. It's Pojilaya Skumbriya. They send Sunset, their best duelist with the telekinesis, over to grab the urn. But do they go to turn it in at enemy territory here, Jason? I feel like this might be a world where they hold on to it and just look for skirmishes while not letting it get turned in.
So ZP, I was actually hoping that Pojilaya would stop farming for just like 10 seconds, allow Metal Skill to catch up in the soul differential, and that way the soul urn turn in will be in medium ground, will be towards the mid part of the map. But they actually did go for the pickup right away. It looks like they're gonna go for the turn in, forcing the fight yet again. Now, Sunset's not going to be here. However, Swan Dive's not alive, so it's still going to be a 5v5 if we see Metal Skill go for the contest. The Affliction goes in. It looks like no chase is going to be happening off of this.
Yeah, Metal Skill decided not to go in on it. I mean, part of it might be where it's at. It's not the best territory for Lash per se, but Frozen Shelter forced out early. Max Rich super low, can't get away. Pojilaya Skumbriya now turning the tables, moving on in. Sunset gets one. You get the Shadow Transformation later to a fight from Helly. Metal Skill still trying to turn it around. Goo Ball in progress. You got the disruption from the Goo Ball. You got Yamato looking for anything. Sunset, though, in the meanwhile, picks up another as TAS the assassinate from above. It's Pojilaya Skumbriya just vastly dominating the fight, Jason.
Yeah, it wasn't even close. Unfortunately, not a single kill coming through for Metal Skill. And you know these shrines are going to be going down here as they do finish off Helly. Spacemaker, your IV are all alone. And honestly, there's really not much you can do to contest this. But it looks like even Pojilaya, are they going to continue for the shrines here? I mean, Lexi's going to be up in a second with the Lash. And actually just going to go and back away here. So go back to farm the jungle, push the lanes out one more time, and take home this 27k lead they currently have.
Take a look at the lead now, Jason. This is where you start to wonder, what is your win condition right now for Metal Skill, right? You're not so far behind that you can't find good team fights, but it's difficult, especially when Pojilaya Skumbriya is running a lineup where they're either hard to get onto with a Vindicta in the back, or there's a Kelvin, a tanky Geist, a tanky Warden. Finding your ideal target as Metal Skill seems difficult, and you have to find that target in order to even conceive of a win condition here.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's just like, who can you realistically kill quickly on Pojilaya Skumbriya and not have to commit too many ultimates to get? Because you're obviously going to need those ultimates later on the fight to deal with other players that are going to be able to carry these fights, right? Sunset and Taz, these are two very formidable forces that you deal with, not to mention Hardeki, who's still putting out some pretty decent damage at 22k souls. As we're about to hit the 18-minute mark, mid boss about 2 minutes away, buffs about 2 minutes away as well. I am curious what the next point of action will be. I'm assuming it's got to be towards these mid buffs, where we did see, I believe, Pojilaya Skumbriya take both.
Or it could be the old 4-on-1 onto Warden. That's what lane 1 is looking like it could go into. But you look at how Zanya has built the Warden. Lots of speed available, sees the pressure coming in, goes, okay, I'm just going to back up a little bit. Meanwhile, in lane, you got Pocket kind of sandwiched between 5, but the 5 don't really seem to be wanting to go in on Pocket. They know it's going to be a longer fight if they do, and instead it's Slash. Lux 1 getting caught, gets hit with the crows, gets hit with the assassinate, 283 HP. That's a Lash that doesn't want to take to the skies, gets a cube, and now it's just all taking place in the garage as both teams getting into it, and it's Pojilaya Skumbriya on the punish, which started with the Vindicta poke.
A great burst and shelter as well, catching out 3 players. More importantly, keeping Swan Dive out of the fight so you can't be disruptive. And with these kills coming through, Pojilaya Skumbriya like, hey, we're going to push your base down now. Knowing there's 30 seconds left to go for multiple players on Metal Skill's side, this can easily be like a double shrine, potentially a transformation of the patron, and even a push into mid boss off the back of the CP. This is very bad for Metal Skill, and you have to wonder what could they possibly do in this situation to drag the game out where they can come back. And for me, it's about Maxich and Swan Dive, just don't die right now. You cannot afford to be desync from your team with mid boss coming up in 40 seconds time.
Jason, you've hit the crux of the issue. Do not die, because better teams in this have run the issues where you lose players in this sort of situation and it just snowballs against you. You have to watch out for the stagger. The only upside here from Metal Skill is that mid boss was not quite back up. Mid boss is coming up in 25 seconds. The death timers didn't directly align, because if it was this entire dynamic came about 30 seconds later, Jason, Pojilaya Skumbriya gets mid boss, and that's probably game.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I completely agree with you here. And well, right now, Metal Skill, they're trying to farm as quick as they possibly can. You can see YG trying to push out lane 4, but there's really no farm for him to get, at least when it comes to safely. As Pojilaya has started to group up on this left-hand side of the map, and we can already see some good damage being done by Together. The cube is already used earlier on as well, so they're just going to have to go in full retreat here. But Helly, he's staying committed. Shadow Transformation comes in as well, and he's looking to be the front line for his team, where Swan Dive, he's unfortunately going to go down. Taz picked himself up 2 quick kills. And Helly, what can you do? Absolutely nothing. Pojilaya Skumbriya going to take this fight as clean as day. However, it looks like Metal Skill trying to send 2 players into lane 3 to push, but they quickly back off, and I think they're just going to settle for the urn.
Together got a very, very good affliction to start that fight. It hit 3 people. It put Metal Skill in the situation where they had the reverse course, and yeah, okay, you have Helly diving in it as Yamato, but it's a 16k Yamato, Jason. No one's afraid of a 16k Yamato when half your team is at 25k or more.
Yeah, well, that's going to be Rejuvenator secured here for Pojilaya Skumbriya, so no one's going to be contestant on the side of Metal Skill. However, they will be able to pick up an urn for their troubles, as it looks like PS won't be... Oh, I say that. Sunset's coming in. He's going to try to stop this turn in. He's going to try to take the turn for himself. The urn will get deposited, though, in time. So Max just secures that, but his life, he might not get away with.
Well, the telekinesis has to travel a long way as Abrams charges. Maxrich, though, still might not leave with his life. Damage coming on. Does look like Maxrich is able to get away. Metal Skin trading out poke. I don't think they want to engage this too much outside the base, but, you know, as I say that, Maxrich gets caught. Metal Skill trying the retreat. We'll see if anyone else gets caught here. If they do, it's probably GG. Pojilaya Skumbriya coming in hard on lane 4. Everyone with Rejuvenator. And even just down 1 here. Now down 2. Jason, this could be it.
I mean, Together is not listening to you. He goes straight in towards the back line and pops off an affliction. They get secure another kill off of this one. The patron will be transformed, and there's still be 4 players left alive. Well, maybe 3 if Swan Dive does not seem to survive here. Very low on health, I'm seeing, at least when it comes to the UI. But this looks like Pojilaya Skumbriya are going to be going yet again for another chance to secure the title back for themselves up against DMS.
Pojilaya Skumbriya, they just need a little bit more. The patron now vulnerable. Everyone has rejuves. They are not backing out. They're going to make the full attempt at the weakened patron. And for Metal Skill, I think the only thing PS has to worry about here is giving up a 5 to 6 man to lash ult into the fountain. That's it. If so long as you don't get your entire team hit by Death Slam, you got this. Telekinesis in, over, damage fall through coming in. You see the Death Slam, but they're just far enough out that he can't get them into the fountain. Maybe a punish will be there, Jason, but really the stat check is too tremendous right now from Pojilaya Skumbriya, and they are healthy on the patron. Patron down the half, and this is going to be GG.
I mean, the toughest thing about this situation is they could have just zerged this down, respawn back in and did it again and still close off the game. But Pojilaya Skumbriya going to have a chance to redeem themselves from prior weeks where they just unfortunately couldn't hold on to that title, as they will advance on to play against DMS. Well done by them, but as you said, ZP, the early to mid game was just too difficult to deal with for Metal Skill.
You know, it's interesting, the point that Dan brought up in the draft, right? And talking about the idea of like, hey, right now teams are even more on the early game because of the economy changes. And look, Pojilaya Skumbriya, I don't think it was entirely due to the team comp. I think the team comp helped. I also think it was mechanical execution. But the fact of the matter is, Jason, the early game was theirs, and they never gave up the lead after. There was never really a bright spot here from Metal Skill, aside from a Rejuvenator steal. That was it. Yeah. It began and ended there for Metal Skill, and they never found anything else to grapple onto in this game.
Well, speaking of grappling on, DDK, are you here? Are you still alive? Hello? We're going to bring you back in onto the show to talk about this last match. And a little bit one-sided, a little bit unfortunate for Metal Skill, since we previously saw them do so well in the Sinner Sacrifice tournament. But PS, I think they're here to play. I think they want that title back.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I got to say is sometimes it's hard when sort of analyzing their comps and you see them play out. It's like, how much is it just that one team's just really was way better at synergizing their comp? And if that team played the other comp, would they have been able to synergize that as well? But like that aside, because we know Pojilaya Skumbriya is a great team. See, I almost took the cop out and then just did the PS, but went for the whole thing in the end. But one thing that was really cool with what they were doing is, and we're going to highlight Litz, is the fact that they had such great synergy when it came to the main objectives. And it was largely speaking, I think, because of the frozen shelter and the capacity when you're, let's say, running the urn into enemy territory, or when you're going for the mid boss, having something like the frozen shelter in play is like absolutely key to ensure that you can actually take those fights. Because if you just imagine, for example, if you don't have tools like that you're able to use when you're ahead, you know, you're going to be in a situation where, yeah, you've got to go into enemy territory, but what do you have to actually still make that a good fight for you? And, you know, we see situations where the other team is like, well, we have to fight this. We can't just allow them to take the end in our territory. We've got to fight this. But when they've got, again, frozen shelter on the other end of it, they're kind of baited into a fight that looks a lot better for them than maybe they actually realize. And then then you can realize the mistake. Oh, we didn't actually force out the ults ahead of time to actually make this a fight that would be a bit better for us. Obviously, you know, starting off like not the best way in the game overall for Metal, but at the same time, like I think you could just see overall like better engagement, better coordination, better spacing, I think, from the team. Obviously, TAS was able to just farm with impunity on the Vindicta and able to really maximize the damage output to just constantly keep them ahead in these fights. Key afflictions landing at the right times as well. Just the team fighting was overall better. And as my last point, to kind of play off of all of the information I just dropped there, it is about playing good team fights even more than it was before, because that is where all the value is now in terms of what Valve is saying with their update. It's like the hero kills, especially as we get past that 15-20 minute mark, are massive. And so you can't bleed hero kills, you can't get staggered, you have to create efficient team fights, and there's so much that goes into that.
Well, ZP, we're taking a look here at our player of the match, and indeed will be Litz here on the Kelvin. You know, my 2 cents about it was he was very impactful in the early game, which allowed Pojilaya Skumbriya to have a very successful mid game, barring everything else DDK just talked about.
Litz was the glue that held together the front line with Zanya and Hardeki, right? Where we kind of glossed over it a little bit because there were more impactful stories that are more visibly apparent. But, you know, the other thing to look at here, too, is kind of the resurgence of Warden, right? Where we didn't put it on the patch notes at the beginning because on face value, it seems like a smaller change. But I do think Warden's consistency got a lot better with just the bullet velocity change. His actual gun damage right now is significantly more consistent. You know, to give you an idea, he essentially starts with a greater than pristine emblem level impact now before buying any bullet velocity relative to where he was in the previous patch. And you take a look at the damage done here, the damage kind of supports just how effective it was, being only 2k behind Sunset, where that was self-evident, right?
Yeah, 100%. And obviously got to get credits together here as well to lead the charge when it came to damage. But one thing I do want to point out was kind of the control out of PS here, because if you look at Metal Skill, you have 3 players with 0 objective damage, meaning there was constant ganks coming through. You were constantly forcing them to play on their side of the map, and you really prohibited them from getting really any of these flex slots rolling. So, I mean, PS, once they got that drop of blood in the water, they smelt it, they swarmed over it, and they let it never go.
Yeah, and you know, one thing that's I think is really interesting too is that Obviously, Liz is healing, so, pretty amazing. Obviously, the frozen shutter is one part of that, but obviously also just having good usage of Health Nova in the right spots. Again, as I mentioned, there's so much that needs to be accounted for when it comes to just the positioning and coordination when you're going to these fights, and how you're supporting your teammates, and when you're popping that Health Nova, and obviously any of the itemization that goes around it, because you can actually extend the range of it as well to increase its effectiveness. So just overall, just like really, I think you would say that they're just a cut above here today, PS, as would be expected, I think, based on everything that we've seen so far, and it just helps to hype us up further for their opponents to come.
Well, it gets me excited, ZP, going to this next match. It is a rematch, actually, of when PS lost their title of Kings of Europe, when DMS actually beat them. My question to you is, before we do head to a break, can PS take it back?
I think between the two teams, you run it 10 times, it's going to be 5-5. I think both these teams are very evenly matched, and I think DMS is a little bit more vulnerable because they have been the Kings of the Hill, not just in our tournament, but in tournaments like Sinner's Sacrifice. So when you're in that top dog spot, you are now the team that everyone is looking at the most in terms of data, in terms of prep. You now have the bullseye on your back, and that's dangerous when you have a team like PS that's had time to sort of lick their wounds and game plan how to fight against you. I think every move that PS does in the draft, and particularly broader macro strategy, is going to be very well thought over, because you're right, they want revenge, and they get their chance coming up next.
Well, speaking of that, we'll be heading straight into our money match here of Europe, the Deadlock Fight Night number 6. We're going to head to a short break. When we come back, we're going to have some nonstop action coming your way, and don't miss it.